In Vue Developer Tools, currently we see that our main component, app, contains 4 additional icon components. One icon inside of the header, and other icons represent menu items within navigation bar. But if we take a closer look at the markup of our navigation inside of app.vue, we can see that markup which represents every menu item is almost identical. Only some parts of it are different, such as icon, text, and the value of href attribute. And right now we're gonna try to improve it somehow. Let's copy one menu item and comment out the rest. In the script area of this component, we're gonna create local constant called navItems. This constant is gonna hold all our page names, timeline activities, and progress. And now based on this array, we're gonna try to generate markup for every menu item. And for this, we'll need to use another Vue directive called Vue4. This directive lets you iterate over data structures, such as arrays and objects, and based on that, repeatedly generate markup of that element on which this directive is used. Here we're gonna write the following notation. This means that we're gonna loop over items within navItems array, and on every loop iteration we're gonna get one value from this array in page variable, which means that this markup will be rendered as many times how many elements we have inside of navItems array. In the browser we can see that our navigation now shows 3 identical menu items, and on the right side we can also see that our main component now holds one local variable, our array of page names. And now let's do the following. Firstly, let's move href attribute at the very beginning of the anchor tag, and we're going to use the value of page variable as the value for this href attribute. In other words, we have to interpolate value of page variables into this href attribute. We can do this in a usual way, just like it's done in JavaScript, by using template strings. But in order to tell Vue that this is not a simple string, but a JavaScript expression, we're gonna have to bind this value to the href attribute. And we do this with the help of another Vue directive called vbind. And now if we in the browser inspect the DOM structure of every link element, we can see that the href attribute will be different for every link. For the first link, it will say timeline. For the second link, it's going to say activities, and so on. And that means that our interpolation works properly. And now let's make it so every link will show appropriate label. To do this, we will also use interpolation, but in a little bit different way. Since in this case we're gonna have to interpolate value into the content of tag. For such cases, Vue uses syntax of double curly braces, inside of which can be any valid JavaScript expression. But for our needs, it is enough to just use variable name in here, page. And sure enough, every menu item will have an appropriate label. And now let's talk about another important thing related to Vue4 directive. It is considered a good practice to always use Vue4 directive along with attribute key. This is a special Vue attribute which Vue will use internally to properly render DOM elements, so it can properly match array elements which we iterate with corresponding DOM elements to avoid any potential rendering issues. And the value of this attribute should be unique for every rendered element. In our case, as a value here, we can simply use variable name page, since all page names in array navItems are unique. And now we just need to render proper icon for every menu item, because currently all items render clock icon. So to fix it, we're gonna do the following. Use already familiar Vue directive v-if. Here we check if the current value of the page variable equals to timeline. We're gonna show one icon. On the next element, we're gonna use another Vue directive called v-else-if. It has the same purpose as the corresponding JavaScript instruction, else-if. So here we compare page variable with the value activities. And eventually, if none of these conditions are met, we're gonna render icon which corresponds to our progress page. We will use here directive v-else. And now let's go over through the flow one more time. Here we iterate over the array nowItems, which contains all page names. And on every loop iteration, we're going to render markup for particular nowItem. And of course, page variable on every loop iteration will be different. And let's not forget and use appropriate icon component names in the second and third cases. And finally, in the browser, we get exactly same result as before, with an exception that now we use more appropriate solution to render list elements by using before directive. At the end, let's go back to the editor, remove all commented markup, and finish the lesson.